Hello everyone. Welcome to the next edition of the series Language Professionals. Today our guest is Leena Sohoni. She is a passionate teacher of German language, prolific writer, and an award-winning translator. She has to her credit more than 55 titles translated from English into Marathi. She has been closely associated with Mehta Publishing House for more than 30 years. To name a few of her titles, Dollar Bahu by Sudha Murthy, Lajja by Taslima Nasreen, Not Without My Daughter by Betty Mehmoodi and William Hofer, Cain and Abel by Jeffrey Archer. I think she breathes words. Come join me in the conversation to understand her journey. But before we begin, let me mention the awards that she has received. For the book Lajja by Taslima Nasreen, she got the Best Translation Award from State Government of Maharashtra in 1995. The Indian Junior Chamber awarded the Kamal Patra Young Achiever Award for contribution to the language industry in 1996. She received the Mehta Publishing House Foundation's Swamikar Ranjit Desai Award for Best Translation of the book I See Aparanache 173 Tas by Nilesh Mishra. In 2004, she received the Maharashtra State Government Award for translation of Sudha Murthy's Wise and Otherwise. Rotary District 3170 conferred the Rotary Vocational Award on her for her contribution to the language industry. The Women's Development Education and Public Welfare Foundation Kolhapur awarded her the Sahitya Bhushan Award in 2008. In the same year, she was the chief guest of the 6th Women's Sahitya Sammelan at Goa, Honda. She got the Best Translation Award by Apte Vachan Mandir, Sangli for her translation of Sudha Murthy's book The Magic Drum and Other Favorite Stories, that is Thailibhar Goshti, in 2009. The Goa Hindu Association in the same year gave her the G.A. Kulkarni Award for her translation of the English book To Serve with Love by E.R. Braithwaite. Her translation into Marathi of the English book The White Tiger by Arvind Adiga won the Balshastri Zambekar Award by Antar Bharti in 2011. She also received the N.C. Kelkar Award for Pune Marathi Granthalaya for her contribution to the language industry. A translator does his work passionately and intently and does not yearn for any award, but good work is definitely rewarded. Welcome to the show, Leena. Congratulations on publication of the 13th edition of Thailibhar Goshti, the translation of the English book of Sudha Murthy, The Magic Drum and Other Stories. Can you tell us something about this book, especially how you chose the word Thailibhar?
At the outset, let me first thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. It was actually very humbling to get the phone call from you suggesting that you consider me as a candidate for this interview series. Yes, I'm very happy that Sudha Murthy's book Thailibhar Goshti is doing so well in Marathi as well as all other books. It is one of Sudha Murthy's most well-known book of tales that cleverly highlights the importance of honesty, integrity in a nasty, perilous world. She heard these engaging, delightful and timeless folk tales in her formative years as a child, obviously from her elders, parents, grandparents, and she found them very impactful. And she has recounted them in this book for her young readers. But my own Marathi readers tell me that these stories are enjoyed by the young and old alike. You were asking me about the title, why I chose the word Thailibhar Goshti, right? So let me tell you the process of choosing a title for any of my translations. You see, if the original book is a bestseller already, and if its title has an identity of its own, that is, if many people already know that such and such book is in the market, then we generally go for the same title. We don't change it. Similarly, if the original title is based on wordplay and it's simply untranslatable, like for example, Sudha Murthy's Wise and Otherwise, then we do not translate it. We use it as it is. But for all other books, especially Sudha Murthy's books, because she is familiar with the Marathi language, I generally email her ahead of time and I suggest 4 to 5 titles, out of which she okays one. In this case too, I had suggested 3 to 4 titles. One was obviously the literal translation, Mantarlela Dholani Itar Katha. Then there was yet another title, Thaili Bhar Shabd. I had picked because there is a story in this book by that title. But then I thought, why not Thaili Bhar Goshti instead, because this is a book of tales. And as luck would have it, Sudhatai rejected all other titles and she chose this one.
Leena, you are a successful translator for leading publishers. So, was this your true calling from the beginning?
I would not go that far. But I did have an interest in literary translations since college days. And I have studied German. So when I was in second year of college, one day I just translated one short story written by the famous German author Hermann Hesse, and I sent it to House magazine. It was a very famous magazine in Pune. It was published, my story was published in House in due course, and to tell you the truth, I was thrilled to see my own name in print, published in a famous magazine. Later on, I did my graduation and post-graduation in German literature, but life took an entirely different turn when I got married, and then I went from Pune to Mumbai. I settled down as a full-fledged homemaker. The thought of having my own career was as far away from my mind as possible, until one day I received a jolt in the form of a casual remark made by a total stranger. See, I was 100% housewife, totally and completely devoted to my family and always at home. So guests found it very convenient to come and go as and when they pleased. One day, one such guest asked me casually, "How do you pass your time, Leena? Playing cards? Kitty parties?" When I heard that remark, it hurt. I really felt bad about myself. I was angry with myself. I lay awake at night. I just couldn't sleep. I was so angry. Who am I really? I asked myself. A housewife? A mother? A wife? Is that all? Is this my sole identity? One thing was very clear. I had to be at home for my children. But was there anything else I could do, even while sitting at home? And then it struck me. Yes, there was something which I could do. That was writing. So the seed was thus sown. My first ever translation, Vidroha, was an outcome of this thought process. I had read this novel, Outrage, written by an American author, Henry Denker. Though the book was not very popular that time, it had haunted me since I had first read it. The protagonist of this novel is a 72-year-old Dennis Riordan. He has been wronged by the system of justice and wants to fight against this injustice. And his defense attorney is young and dynamic Ben Gordon, who has the audacity to hold the entire justice system accountable for this wrongdoing. Renowned publisher Mr. Anil Mehta of Mehta Publishing House gave me my first break, and I'll be always grateful to him for that. There is no looking back since then.
Recently, the 10th edition of your translated book, Not Without My Daughter, was published. What a wonderful moment it must have been. Can you tell us more about it?
It indeed was a cherishable moment, as this book is very close to my heart, especially Because you see, when I was actually translating the book, Beti Mahmoodi's daughter, her name is Mahatob, and my own daughter, they were of the same age. So, it was heartbreaking for me to see Beti's pain, because I was so involved in Beti's life that I was actually going through her suffering. But Beti showed an astounding level of courage in the face of adversity. Even now, I cannot imagine being in her shoes. There was nothing that Beti's husband could have said or done to force Beti into submission. She endured violent abuse from her husband, isolation, and horrible cultural shock. All the while, she never even once stopped planning and plotting for her escape. I'm simply amazed at what one can accomplish when truly forced up against wall. I think if you want something bad enough, no one can stop you from achieving your goal. As Beti's father said, when there is a will, there is a way. This book is very close to my heart. It remains my most favorite translation till date.
While translating, Leena, are there phases where you have to struggle for words or phrases?
Yes, it happens more frequently than you could imagine. Idiomatic expressions explain something by way of unique examples or figures of speech. And most importantly, the meaning of these peculiar phrases cannot be predicted by the literal translation of the words it contains. I can give you an example. In English, they use this expression, carrying coals to Newcastle. The idiom has been around for over 500 years now. When you carry or take coals to Newcastle, you are actually doing something that is totally unnecessary. That is what it means. You are taking or giving something to someone which he does not really need. Perhaps he has already a lot of it. In Hindi also we have an exact translation of this idiom. In Hindi we say, ulte baas bareli ko lena. I can give you another example. In English we say, dog in a manger. And in Marathi we say, gavan itla kutra. But I tell you, a translator is extremely lucky if he finds such equivalence. Most of the time we have to explain the figurative meaning behind the idiom or phrase. Sarcasm. Sarcasm is yet another figure of speech which poses a challenge. Sarcasm is a sharp, bitter or cutting style of expression that usually means the opposite of its literal phrasing. Sarcasm frequently loses its meaning when translated word for word into another language and can often cause unfortunate misunderstandings. For example, it's a funny example. In Marathi, we express our anger or annoyance at someone or even disrespect by saying to that person, "Wah, far shahane आहात तुम्ही." It just cannot be translated word for word. I asked many people. But just for fun, one day I asked Google Translate app to translate this sentence for me. And you know what? Google said, "You are very wise." That's the exact opposite meaning. Words or phrases are still okay. But more than the words, it's the concepts or cultural reference that pose a real challenge. For example, how in the world are we going to explain to a foreigner the meaning of pindala kavla shivne? So we translators rely on footnotes. Same goes with coinage of words or word play. Some authors are fond of word play, and word plays are totally untranslatable, I tell you. Humor poses yet another challenge. Situational comedy is still okay, but humor based on word play is extremely difficult to translate. But I have seen some translators who just go ahead and translate these phrases and idioms word for word. I actually read this sentence somewhere. The translator had written, त्याने आपल्याकडची सगळी अंडी एका टोपलीत भरली होती. I found it ridiculous. It was a direct translation of the phrase to put all eggs in one basket. Some other person had translated the simple sentence, he chuckled, as त्याने तोंडाने चकचक असा आवाज केला. So you know, a translator's job is not easy at all.
Translation means a double responsibility of remaining loyal to both languages, that is the source language and the target language. So how do you manage this? Have you taken any special training for this or any formal education?
For my postgraduate studies, I had one paper on translation, and that was the extent of my knowledge when I started my actual translation work. Even though my first translated book was very raw, I mean, if I read it now, I find it very raw. It was still well received at that time. I was lucky, I must say. And thereafter, I kept getting translation work regularly. So for me, it was more like on-the-job training, or you can call it hands-on experience. There were no translation courses available back then. That was 33 years ago, at least not to my knowledge. When I was translating the much controversial book Lajja by Bangladeshi author Taslima Nasreen, I was young, inexperienced, and I had only 3 published translations to my credit. So you can say I was just 3 books old. But I was freelancing for Mehta Publishing House, and they had able editors who enlightened me, educated me on the various theories of translation. That experience was very enriching, and it served as a guiding light for my entire career. It was during this time that I learned to keep all my own beliefs, feelings, emotions, and mental disposition aside. I was told by the editor never ever to reflect my own thoughts into the book. You see, the book always belongs to the original author. It's its intellectual property, you must say. No matter what, the translator has the responsibility to preserve its content and spirit. Soon after that, Lajja became famous in Marathi too. People started recognizing me as a good translator. And later on, I studied theory of translation as well. But of course, it was self-study.
Leena, your translations are known for your flowing and lucid language. How do you achieve this? We would really like to know.
Thank you very much, Lalita, for saying this. Yes, I do take special efforts for that. They say a translation should imitate the style of the original author. And I tell you, that is a tall order. Because there are various writing styles such as descriptive, narrative, persuasive, and expository writing style. Again, each author has his or her own unique writing style. Some authors have a very rich language. Some are very stylish and posh and articulate. Some have circuitous style of writing. And some authors like Sudha Murthy write very simple and straightforward. A translation needs to take into consideration the writing style of the original author and must come up with equivalent style of writing in the target language. I am using the word equivalent. It takes efforts, but it is still achievable, I would say. In my journey of 33 years, I came across various styles. For example, Raju Bharatan writes in a friendly, unorthodox manner. Sanjaya Baru's choice of words and sentence construction I find a bit complicated. But I really had to struggle, I tell you, when I was translating Aravinda Adiga's award-winning novel, The White Tiger. Because the protagonist, or the anti-hero as we may call him, he grew up in a slum area. He was a driver. And so his way of thinking and his language is abusive in the book. He uses cuss words in abundance. And I grew up in a cultural household. We all are. I was in the teaching profession all my life. I was living in a small town where everybody knows everybody. The book was quite outside my comfort zone, I should say. But as a translator, I am supposed to not let this bother me. I actually asked people to help me with the vocabulary, especially the curse words, and I completed the translation. Later on, the same translation received Bharati Award.
There have been multiple editions of many of your translations. For example, Wise and Otherwise, 25 editions. Goshti Mansancha, 23 editions. Punyabhumi Bharat, 14 editions. Tell us the secret behind this, Leena.
Oh, secret, huh? That's a tough question to answer because even I sometimes wonder about it. And let us say I have been very lucky. Thanks to my publisher, I always got great literary works for translation. Secondly, the quality of the finished product, that is, the produced book. You know, there is too much involved here. The editing, the typesetting, the artwork, the cover, and most importantly, the distribution network for my books is also impeccable. Thanks to my publisher. My books have reached far and wide. Do you know, I found my own 17 books on the shelves of a library in the US. And it's entirely my publisher's supply network. One thing I know about my Marathi readers, they are very difficult to please, I tell you. They have a great taste. You can't take them for a ride. You need to be honest. But if they trust you, if they love you and respect you, then they will always uphold you.
While translating, do your thoughts or ideologies interfere with the text that you are translating?
Based on this vast experience, I have come to one conclusion. Each creative writer has his own style, his own moods, his likes and dislikes, his passions. A translator's job is very much similar to that of a professional photographer, I should say. He needs to possess a lot of skill, of course, but at the same time, he can never pretend to be a painter. He just doesn't have the same freedom that a painter has. He cannot paint a picture as per his wish and whim. At the same time, he must possess honesty and integrity, mastery over words. And one more thing, he has to be extremely sensitive. He must possess the power of perception. He should understand the innermost feelings of the writer. After all, translation is like going under somebody else's skin and momentarily living their life, forgetting your own, getting to know their thought process. It's actually like this. You become one with something that is not yours in the first place. And then you try to recreate the same, but through a different medium. A translator has to bear this in mind. You see, when a translator writes, nobody is going to ask him why he has written something in a particular fashion or why not. He is only answerable to his own self. But a translator is answerable to his million readers who have placed absolute faith in him, critics who are sitting down with a microscope. And of course, he is also answerable to the original author. If readers like his work, major portion of the credit automatically goes to the original author. But for some reason, if the translated book does not do well in the market, then the translator might have to face the music from his readers, from his critics, and even from the publisher. So, an experienced translator always keeps his own self, his own ego, his own thoughts and feelings aside, and he does his job with a certain objectivity. A translator is like a drop of oil in the surface of water.
Leena, does translation change you as a person? What do you think?
It did change me as a person. As I told you earlier, I was a wife, a mother, and a homemaker before I started this translation work. But my translations gave me my own identity. They gave me an altogether different perspective to look at people and relationships. You see, before reacting to anything that is said in front of me, even now, I start asking myself this question: what did they actually mean to say? Did I interpret that correctly? Translation work also enhanced my cultural awareness, and I understood how cultural assumptions affect the communication process. I also learned the importance of integrity, as it is an absolute requirement of a translator to remain faithful to the original text. This profession intensified my ability to focus on smaller details as well as stay organized. Because of the nature of my work, I came into contact with many literary personalities also. Even now, I usually try to establish a contact with people whose works I am translating, either in person or via phone or email. It helps. This contact proved to be quite impactful for me.
Leena, what is your take on translation? It is an art or is it a science? What do you think?
It is a very good question, Lalita, but it is also a very difficult question to answer. Though a translator has to follow some norms or guidelines, and though there are some set of boundaries, I find it very difficult to call it a science. There are most certainly no standards like physics or mathematics here. So I can say that translation studies can be regarded as a science. However, if we take the product of translation into account, it seems rational to think of it as a craft or art. Because language is a nuanced and non-binary entity with a number of different layers, and because often there is no right or wrong answer when it comes to translation, it is possible for two linguists to convey the exact same text differently, and whilst both remaining accurate and correct. So, if you give one text to a group of translators as an assignment, they all will come up with different versions of the translated text. And surprisingly, all the versions may be more or less close to the original text. So, you wouldn't be able to provide a model answer to them. So, basically, in my opinion, translation is a mixture of both art and science, as it requires a skill, knowledge of the source language, as well as knowledge of the target language, in addition to acquaintance with translation theories. Recently, even you must have heard the term transcreation. Transcreation is a blend of two words, translation and creation. It is often referred to as creative translation too. Transcreation usually considers a number of aspects such as language, emotions, and cultural and socio-economic factors which may contribute to how the intended message is perceived by the target audience. So I would say translation is 80% art and 20% science.
You have translated books of various authors. So, did you get any opportunity or any chance to meet any of the authors? And if you have met, how was the experience?
My second translation was released at the hands of noted Marathi author and poet Shantabai Shelke. I was very lucky. It was a wonderful experience, you know. Of course, I had never translated her works into any other language, but I was her most ardent fan, and I feel blessed to have met her. I did get an opportunity to meet quite a few literary personalities over the past 30 or so years. But I would like to mention here two of them. Let me first express my feelings about noted philanthropist and chairperson of Infosys Foundation, Mrs. Sudha Murthy. Over the past few years, there were ample occasions and many places where I met her. I spent time with her. And every time I was amazed at how wonderfully down to earth she is. We both share a very special bond with each other. She herself has said many times, Leena knows my heart. You know what she calls me? Sudhatai calls me her Yashoda. She says, as far as my books are concerned, I am Devaki and Leena is Yashoda. And we both love our child, that is our book, equally. She also says, Leena is like my daughter. And I am so touched by this. Generally, we see that celebrities have two personalities. One is their public personality, which is normally fake, and the other is their private personality or true personality. But not in this case. Sudha Murthy madam is 100% true inside and out. There is nothing fake about her. And she still upholds the age-old middle-class values. And then I want to talk about Mr. Jeffrey Archer. He is a prolific writer and a consummate storyteller. He has been my idol since the day I read his bestseller, Cain and Abel. What happened is, in the year 2008, an opportunity arose for me to meet him in person when he was touring this part of the world for the pre-release publicity of his upcoming book, A Prisoner of Birth. He had just arrived from Mumbai and he had checked into Hotel Blue Diamond in Pune. My publisher, Mr. Sunil Mehta, and we went to meet him together in the hotel. I had just translated his collection of short stories by name To Cut a Long Story Short. I presented a copy to him. He was extremely pleased. He accommodated us in his busy schedule and gave us exclusive 20 minutes. He asked me so many questions and was quite thrilled to know that I had travelled 235 kilometers because I had come down from Kolhapur and I had come to Pune just to meet him. He then asked me, why don't you translate my upcoming book, A Prisoner of Birth, as well as Cain and Abel? And I was so happy. He also gave me his email ID and later on I translated many of his books. We kept in touch through email, and whenever I had any query, I would just email his secretary and I would receive a reply within 4 hours. Later on in the year 2014, I was travelling via London to Chicago. So I wrote to his secretary and I expressed my wish to meet him if possible. He immediately invited me to his home. You see, I was travelling with my husband, so I told him that. So he invited both of us. It was a beautiful experience. We spent 45 minutes at his place. We talked about many things.
You are a German language expert as well. So do you have any plans to translate any German books into Marathi or Marathi into German?
Lalita, come on. I do not consider myself a German expert. At least not in front of you. Yes, it is true that I did my graduation as well as my post-graduation in German, and I also taught this subject in college in Kolhapur for nearly 19 years. But that's the extent of my contribution to the German language. I could have done so much more, and I do regret it now. Sometimes, yeah. See, there are people who can focus on multiple things and do all of them brilliantly. You, for example. But I am not that type of a person. I can handle only one thing at a time. So once I started English to Marathi translation, I just plunged into it deep. And yes, I do get time in my very tight schedule. I may take up translation work from German to Marathi in future. But right now, there are no such plans.
How was your experience as a German teacher? Because it is a totally different kind of experience than being a translator, right?
Oh, I loved being a teacher. You know what? I had started teaching while I was a student myself. While I was in college, my professor would assign me to work with weaker students or late admissions in the class. Later on, while I was doing my MA, I was teaching German at a local school. And much later, I also taught German in a college. So, you could say teaching comes naturally to me. I was a popular teacher because if you could create interest for your subject in the minds of the most notorious students or mediocre students in the class, then you are definitely a successful teacher. I tell you, many of my students changed their initial objective of becoming a bank professionals, and they opted for making a career in German instead after they attended my lectures. They told me time and again that it was a life-changing experience for them. So I believe I am a successful teacher if I am successful in making minimum one student achieve his or her goal in life. And I have done that.
Leena, you have taught the theory of translation at Shivaji University, Kolhapur. So which language pair did you handle there? Like it was English Marathi or English German, or how was it?
Yes, I taught theory of translation to the postgraduate course in journalism at Shivaji University. That is Master of Journalism. I taught there for nearly 2 years. It was basically for English to Marathi translation. It was a difficult task as most of my students were already working with some local newspaper or the other. And since the course was newly introduced, there was no fixed syllabus. I had a free hand. That was good. I designed the syllabus. And in my class, barring one student, everybody was very, very weak in English grammar. And their vocabulary was also not up to the mark. So one full month, we concentrated just on English grammar.
And what did this translation course involve? Like what were the components of the translation course?
All my students were working as reporters. And since I told you there was no pre-existing syllabus, the head of the department asked me to design the course in such a way that it would be beneficial to my students' day-to-day job as a journalist. So, there was a little bit of theory of translation in the beginning, not much. And then we devoted the remaining part of the year to practice actual newspaper translation. So, I would gather newspaper cuttings from various English dailies. Then I typed them neatly on my home computer, and then I would make copies for my students, for everybody. And then there were weekly tests and a lot of homework.
You had the opportunity to visit Germany twice, right? So once by invitation from the Goethe Institute and another time by invitation from the Cultural Ministry of Germany. So how was that experience?
You see, I had been to Germany a couple of times as a tourist earlier before I went on scholarship, but visiting Germany as a teacher and receiving training there in the classroom was a very different experience for me, altogether different. But I must say, it was a very enriching experience for me both the times. When Goethe Institute offered me a scholarship, I went to Berlin first time. There I stayed with a very old loving German couple as their house guest. And second time, it was a residential course, so we all teachers lived together in the hostel, which was in the premises of our training institute. Both these courses have taken me to a selected few cities in Germany, and they also allowed me to visit places of historical significance. We visited few publishing houses, then we visited museums. We could meet and interact with local people, including even government officials. We could develop friendship and partnership with educators from across the world. Then I learned some techniques which I could apply in my class after coming back.
Your translations have received the Best Translation Award so many times. So tell me, how does it feel?
Yes, Lalita, I did receive quite a few awards during my career. But to tell you the truth, receiving awards is something that gives you a momentary high and an impetus to work harder to achieve your best potentials. Of course, it feels great. Your name appears in the news. People congratulate you and all that. But honestly speaking, that is not something that keeps me going, More than anything else, I enjoy the love and the respect that I receive from my readers. You see, when they send me letters and in recent times, emails to express their appreciation and gratitude, I cherish those. I still remember once a woman called me at my residence at 11 o'clock at night and she was crying. She had just finished reading Not Without My Daughter. She said she had lived in Iran for a few years and Betty's story had touched her heart. Sometimes my readers, they call me up to complain that there is always a long waiting list for my books in the library. When I hear this, Lalita, I feel happy. I feel exhilarated. My books are read all over the world and I receive emails from my readers from different parts of the world. It feels good. Or when a great philanthropist like Sudha Murthy ji, she appreciates my efforts in press conferences or on national television, I feel overwhelmed.
Have you thought of authoring a book in any language? It could be English, German or Marathi?
Yes, I have. In fact, I am halfway through writing a book on translation. The first part of it is a little bit autobiographical, in a sense that I have talked about my journey and my growth as a translator. Here I have recounted my own experiences. I have also talked about the hurdles that I had to overcome, or also the mistakes that I committed due to sheer ignorance. And in the second part, which I am soon going to write, I have just started writing, I am going to talk about techniques and strategies of translation. It is going to be like a practical handbook for people who want to make a career in the field of translation. And then there is one more book that I am planning to write very, very soon. Over the years, I have written quite a few articles and blogs on different platforms. So I want to compile them all, write a few more, and then publish a book of those. Those articles, some of them are in Marathi, some of them are in English. Let's see when this dream of writing my own book comes true.
If you were to change anything in the language industry, what would that be?
I would recommend that language professionals receive some basic training before undertaking any task. I can talk about translators in particular because that is my subject. You see, people have this wrong notion that if they are fluent in any two languages, it is sufficient to become a translator. But that is not true. Even you know that. They need to first learn the theory of translation. Not extensively, I guess, but at least some basics. They need to take into account the do's and don'ts, need to familiarize themselves with the rules and the ethics of translation. There is also one more thing. I want to talk about it. I find today's media saturated, instant gratification culture dangerous, especially for this language industry. People want results immediately. They have no patience. They are just not ready to wait. I find today's translators are accepting various translation assignments from various publishers at the same time. And then naturally, they are often seen juggling several tasks at once because they cannot give justice to any one of these. I think this is one area of concern we need to address. Translation should not be regarded as a mechanical job. It needs special skill set. It needs hard work, perseverance. As the most significant international literary prize, the Nobel Prize in Literature is always well discussed in media everywhere. However, not many people give attention to the role of translation in this prize. In many cases, the works that the Nobel Prize judges evaluate are in fact translations, not the prize winner's own words. But unfortunately today, I can see translators way younger than me churning out translations with Olympian speed, and I do not know how they manage it. See, a book of 350 pages may normally take up to 6 to 7 months in the normal course. That is my experience. That is, if you do your job carefully, paying attention to each and every word. But some translators today finish translating a whole book in 12 to 15 days. And I always wonder, how is this even possible? In my opinion, all translators need to first achieve considerable proficiency in listening, reading and writing. They must recognize culture-specific perspectives and values embedded in language behavior. They should be able to decode, analyze and interpret authentic texts of different genres. That is the reason why I feel the role of training is vital.
What are your future plans, Leena?
Well, I already told you about the 2 books that I am currently working on. But very soon, I also want to start mentoring a few men and women who seriously wish to pursue a career in translation. You see, when you cross a certain age, when you become as old as me, you start looking at your own life from a different perspective altogether. You want to pass on what little bit of wisdom you have gained in your profession to the future generations. Let's see how it works out. Besides, I want to also devote some daily time for reading. Right now, I am so much busy with my writing that I do not get as much time to read as I would like to. When you have crossed 60 and when you sit at your laptop writing for 4 to 5 hours daily, it takes its toll on your health. You strain your eyes so much that you do not have the energy left to do anything else. I need to also focus on my health. So, that is it.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey and joining us in this edition of the Language Professionals series. It was lovely to have a conversation with you. I wish you all the best for all your future plans. Thank you so much.